Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 officially licensed games. So I had just gotten an offer, and I accepted, for reviewing an officially licensed game that's coming to me. And it got me thinking about, again, how far officially licensed games have come in recent years. When I was a kid growing up, and actually into my adulthood as well, generally speaking, if you saw a board game or tabletop game that was an officially licensed game, you were fairly certain it was going to be garbage. Hot garbage, in fact. A steaming pile of hot garbage. Most of them were just awful cash grabs with no talent or creativity involved whatsoever. That said, that has really changed. A lot of recent licensed games have been actually fantastic. Now, of course, I have not tried them all, but I have tried quite a few, and I've managed to put together a list of my top 10 favorite officially licensed games of the ones I have tried. So without any further ado, we're going to get to my number 10. Number 10. My number 10 favorite officially licensed game is a game that was licensed from a role-playing game, another tabletop game, to be done as a board game. And this is one that has been in my collection for a very long time. This is Lords of Waterdeep. So Lords of Waterdeep was one of the earlier big successful worker placement games back when modern worker placement was kind of a newer style. And this is a game that was licensed from Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons was the IP. This is a famous city, Waterdeep, in, I believe, the Forgotten Realms setting of D&D. And in the game, you are hiring heroes to go and do adventures for you, but this is done as a worker placement kind of fashion. Different color workers represent the different classes of heroes from the game of Dungeons and Dragons, and different quests, which you need to have completed by heroes working for you, have different colors showing what kind of heroes would be required to complete said quests. So you have to draft your heroes, which are your workers, to send them out on quests. This is a really fun game. It is still in my collection. And actually is a really good example of the worker placement genre, and a really good example of how to do a worker, both a worker placement game right, and also how to do a license right, because they came up with a very creative way to represent what they were trying to represent as a board game, while still being quite thematic to the original official license that they were going for. And that's why Lords of Waterdeep is my number 10 favorite officially licensed game. Number 9. My number 9 favorite officially licensed game is a game I've sung the praises of on this channel many times before because of how much it surprised me with how awesome it is. It is a game that is licensed from an IP that was from both a manga and an anime series. This is Death Note Confrontation. So Death Note, of course, was a manga and anime series about a Shinigami, which is the Japanese equivalent to the Angel of Death or a Grim Reaper, who drops their notebook, which allows them to choose who dies, onto Earth to see what will happen. And then it's the story of the high school student who picks it up and begins using it, as well as a detective who's attempting to discover who it is who is killing all of the world's worst criminals, essentially, because the high school student starts bumping off criminals with the notebook, with the Death Note. So now the way they did it, again, very well done. This is a very brilliantly designed game that really fits the theme. They decided to do this very interesting asymmetrical deduction game where one player plays as Light Yagami, or Kira, as they are in the Death Note series. They are the character who has the Death Note, and they're using it to kill criminals. So you give them, you feed them information as the other character, who is L, the detective. You feed them information about criminals in certain areas in a way to try to get them to reveal themselves. Now, as Kira or Light, you have to kill criminals each night, but you got to be careful not to give yourself away. Whereas as L, you're trying to collect the information, try to figure out which of the suspects is actually the killer. So it's really rather brilliant. I have said before that this game very much feels to me like a modern reinterpretation of mechanics from the classic games of Battleship and Clue, but done in a really modern and interesting way, and really is a phenomenally thematic game. It fits the story so well. I am a huge fan of the Death Note anime. I've watched the entire series as well as the Japanese live action movies, and I have to say this is a game that really represented that on the tabletop amazingly well, and an amazing fun package. And that is why Death Note Confrontation is my number 9 favorite licensed game.
Number 8.
My number 8 favorite licensed game is a game based on a book and TV miniseries, though I think actually more on the book itself, because there are no images in it, I believe, from the miniseries. But this is World Without End. Now, this is a buffet of Euro game mechanics. You've got a rondel, you've got a little bit of worker placement, you've got a bit of action selection and hand management and all sorts of really cool Eurogame mechanics. And this is the sequel to Pillars of the Earth, both as a book and as a game, because there was a game of Pillars of the Earth as well. But World Without End is by far my favorite of the series of games based on these series of books. This one has the deepest and most satisfying rule set, and I really feel is a fantastic, fantastic board game. Now, full disclosure, I have never read the book or watched the series, but Lynn has, and says that the mechanics do make sense to represent this story on the tabletop with the game. And also, this is just on a surface level, as a board game, a phenomenal board game. Incredibly fun, beautifully produced, really fantastic, and that is why World Without End made it all the way down to my number 8 favorite licensed game.
Number 7.
My number 7 favorite licensed game is a game based on a fictional abstract strategy game with a hand of cards that was shown played in a comic book series / graphic novel series. Now, this is one of my favorite comic book series of all time. It is, the comic series is Mouse Guard. The game is Mouse Guard Swords and Strongholds. So this is not a game meant to represent the graphic novel of Mouse Guard, but again, meant to represent a fictional game that the mice in Mouse Guard are shown being played by them in a tavern pub / sort of scenario. It's shown in a couple different places. There's one part in the original Mouse Guard series where a couple of the characters during the winter are having a beer and playing it, and there's during the Tales of the Guard series, I believe it was called, where they had a bunch of Mouse Guard hanging out in a pub and telling stories. Some of the mice were shown playing this game. Now, of course, in the graphic novel, it was just a game being played. It was an abstract strategy game with cards, and there were no rules, of course, for the game then. But a company went to the writer of the graphic novel series and said, "Hey, I got a great idea for a game," and they came up with Mouse Guard Swords and Strongholds. And the game is fantastic. It's very enjoyable. It's still up there as one of my favorite abstract strategy games of all time. I absolutely love it. And it looks like the game played in the graphic novels, and they came up with a really good and interesting rule set to represent it on the tabletop. And I think this is a really fun and awesome thing to do. There've been a number of other games that have done that. Tack was another one where they, again, took a game from a novel series from the King Killer Chronicles and brought it to the tabletop, and I love it when people do this. But in my opinion, at the moment, Mouse Guard Swords and Strongholds is my favorite example of this, but I do hope that people keep doing this because this is a really fun idea. And that's why Mouse Guard Swords and Strongholds is my number 7 favorite licensed game.
Number 6.
My number 6 favorite licensed game is the game Wolfwalkers: My Story. Now, this is based on the movie Wolfwalkers, which is an animated family film, which is absolutely fantastic. If you have not seen Wolfwalkers, Watch this movie. It is so good. The characters are fantastic. The voice acting is fantastic. The animation is top notch. Really phenomenal movie. Now, the game Wolfwalkers My Story is not a game that has an incredible amount of thematic link to the original IP. It mainly uses the original IP as artwork and a backdrop to make this kind of pattern-forming, card-laying game. Now, the game itself is phenomenal. It may not link thematically super well to the movie, but it's an amazing game in its own right. And it really could have had almost any theme on it. It's just they put the beautiful artwork and theme of Wolfwalkers on it. But you know what? I don't really have a complaint about the fact that it doesn't link up thematically that well, just because of how enjoyable the game is. I just played this game again very recently. It hit the table again for me, and it reminded me of how much I really enjoy Wolfwalkers My Story. Basically, you have cards that you're drafting, and then you're drafting them to lay them out in a tableau. And as you're placing the cards out, there's some cards that have symbols on them, and that's it. They have artwork from the story and then symbols that represent the things going on in that part of the story. And then there are other cards that have patterns, and the patterns then have to be fulfilled by the cards with the symbols on them somewhere else in your tableau. So it might be a shape, or it might be having certain symbols in a row or column without other symbols in a row or column, or all sorts of interesting things, or having certain symbols outnumber other symbols in the total tableau. There are all sorts of different ways to score points based on these goal cards, and the game is super fun, super enjoyable, and that is why Wolfwalkers My Story has made it all the way down to my number 6.
Number 5.
My number 5 favorite licensed game was licensed from a video game, and this is Crusader Kings. So Crusader Kings is a series of video games about running a dynasty of kings during the Crusades in Europe. It's not as much about the Crusades as it is just about running your dynasty and making sure that they stay viable and powerful and gain territory, etc. And the board game captures that very, very well. On its surface, it looks like an area control game, and it kind of is. But Battles and Conquering are actually lesser in regard to the things you do in this game. It's actually something that takes kind of a backseat. You will have battles, you will do invasions, but more than that, you will orchestrate political marriages and annex areas that you have orchestrated political marriages to, and make sure that you have an heir that can take over your throne when your current monarch dies, because this is something that actually happens quite a bit. Your monarchs will grow old and die, and you need to have a viable heir to take over who has positive traits. There's also this bag building aspect where you get to put traits into the bag, and traits are drawn to see if you succeed or fail at certain things. The game is amazingly fun and way more in depth and way more of a simulation of actually running a dynasty than I originally thought it was going to be when I was sent it for review. I was thinking it was going to be just kind of another area control game, but it's much more special than that. This game is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't tried Crusader Kings, it's really, really interesting, and it got a really interesting series of mechanics in it that make it stand out and make it really shine amongst other area control games, because of how the area control is really, like I said, it's a basis, it's a backdrop, but it's not the main focus of the game. The crusading itself also, in the title there, is not the main focus of the game. That's kind of a side thing that you send people off on crusades to get you points and other abilities, but generally speaking, again, it's all about running your dynasty, arranging marriages, annexing smaller kingdoms, etc. But that is why Crusader Kings made it all the way down to my number 5. I absolutely adore this game. It is tons of fun, and it is my number 5 favorite licensed game.
Number 4.
My number 4 favorite licensed game is a bit of an odd one on this list, because it is not licensed from a movie or a book or a graphic novel or another game from a different genre. It's licensed from an old brand that generally doesn't really exist too much anymore, except that someone still owns the IP and licenses it out for branding purposes. This is Pan Am. So Pan Am, if you're not familiar, was a very successful airline back in the day. But as an airline, doesn't exist anymore. The brand itself still exists and still gets licensed out for use, and this is one of those cases where it was. The Pan Am board game is a game where you do bidding and drafting and worker placement, all for trying to build an airline and airline routes to eventually sell said routes to Pan Am. This is supposed to be being done in the heyday of Pan Am, where they were one of the biggest airlines around and were buying up smaller, little, tiny airlines and their routes. The idea here being you do a startup airline literally just to make valuable routes to then sell them to Pan Am and make the most profit doing so. This game is a ton of fun. It is very thematic and really captures that nostalgia feel. And yeah, I love it. And that's why it made it down to be my number 4 on my list of officially licensed games.
Number 3.
My number 3 favorite licensed game is a game based on a movie that I watched back in the early 90s when it first came to theaters. I saw it in theaters, absolutely adored it. It is Rocketeer, Fate of the Future. And this may very well be one of, if not the very most properly thematic game on this list in regard to how well it represents the original IP. The game plays out as a 1v1 game where you're playing across a board with different locations, and each of you are controlling a few characters that you're trying to control the locations to find the blueprint plans to the rocket engine. Now, while playing the game, one player plays the good guys and one player plays the bad guys, and you're basically playing out the entire plot of the movie, which is absolutely amazing. I reviewed this game and I was blown away by it. It is so thematic, it is so well done, and it is so fun. This is a game that really 100% embodies how to do a board game based on a movie right. There are so many other movie board games that were done wrong. I wish those people had taken lessons from the designers of this game, which was Prospero Hall, I believe, the team of people over at Funko Games. They designed Rocketeer Fate of the Future, and they did a phenomenal job on it. This game is absolutely amazing. The miniatures are great, the artwork is great, and the feel of the game 100% represents the movie on the tabletop, which is amazing. And that is why Rocketeer Fate of the Future made it all the way down to my number 3 favorite licensed game.
Number 2.
My number 2 favorite licensed game is a tabletop miniature game made to represent big battles in space. This is Star Wars Armada. I absolutely adore this game with its pre-painted minis and incredibly epic fleet battles that very well represent the big battle at the end of Return of the Jedi, as well as the big battle in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. This game is so fun. It has evolved over time. The mechanics of how you fight feel very representative of the battles. The mechanics of how you do fleet building and picking the cards for the different specific crew members on the fleets and the admirals that are controlling the whole fleet and all of their abilities is tons of fun, really strategic, very interesting. The game is super strategic, super tactical. It is a tabletop miniatures war strategy game about epic battles in space. And they managed to do, while they were expanding the game, basically every one of the ships from the original trilogy and more. They also did ships that appeared in Rogue One, and they even did some of the ships from the prequel trilogy. So this was a fantastic game. It's still in print, though the amount of new material coming out for it has severely slowed down in recent times. They are keeping the game in print, but not expanding it as much as they used to, though they say they may come back to it at some point. It is under the Asmodee umbrella. It used to be under Fantasy Flight Games under Asmodee, but now they've switched it over to Atomic Mass Games. And I do hope they come back to it, and I do hope they make some more ships for it, because this game is a ton of fun, really interesting, and I'm glad I have it in my collection. And even if they don't make anything else for it, I've got the entirety of the Imperial and Rebel fleets, and all their fighters, and I can keep playing it from now until the end of time. They don't actually have to make anything else for me to keep enjoying it, though I would like them to. But I absolutely love this game. I think it is one of the best representation of big capital ship battles in space of all time. Very thematic for the Star Wars universe, and it's why it is my number 2 favorite licensed game.
And now it is time for number 1.
My number 1 favorite licensed game is another spaceship battling game, but it is more of a dogfight game than it is a epic capital ship battle game. And it is from a different IP. It is not Star Wars. This is Battlestar Galactica Starship Battles. Now, unfortunately, this game is out of print. The company that was making it lost the license to be able to do Battlestar Galactica games, which is very unfortunate because of how amazing this game is. Now, the game very thematically represents dogfighting in the Battlestar Galactica universe, especially with the fact that they came up with rules to represent inertia in a vacuum environment. You can fire your thrusters in one direction, and then you have maneuvering jets that you can use to turn sideways and be firing at an enemy as you fly by them, with the inertia carrying you on before you fire your thrusters off and go in your new direction. It is incredibly thematically done, and the dogfighting is bar none my favorite dogfighting tabletop game of all time. I think they really captured it well, and I've liked a lot of dogfighting games over the years, but I don't think any of them have done it as well as Battlestar Galactica Starship Battles. I absolutely adore this game. The pre-painted miniatures also are some of the best pre-painted miniatures I have ever seen in any tabletop game ever. A new gold standard by which all other pre-painted minis will be judged by. Right before they went out of print, I made sure to buy all of the ships I was missing, so I have a full collection of every ship they ever released for it, so I can keep playing this game in perpetuity. I would have liked to have seen more ships because they were talking about doing ships from the old 70s show, which would have been really awesome, as well as doing some epic scale ships to actually have the Battlestar Galactica and a Cylon base star. But as none of that is happening anymore, I am still happy that I at least have all my ships, and I will never part with them because I absolutely adore this game, because Battlestar Galactica Starship Battles is my number 1 favorite licensed game of all time. It is truly, truly awesome. So let me know in the comments down below, what games have I not tried? What games have I missed that are great licensed games that you love? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this list and you'd like to see me do more like it, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.